Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Kurt Simonson, and I've been a member at St. Mark's Lutheran Church since I was in grade 4. So I've been here quite some time. I've known Shaun Loney for what seems like 100 years, but it's probably Shaun about 15, maybe 17 years. Irony of ironies, there was a point in time in my career where Shaun was my boss. So I still have this trepidation when I'm talking to Shaun. But I've learned to lose that because Shaun likes to talk, and he has some wonderful ideas. And I'm going to challenge all of you here today because like I say, I've known Shaun for years. And I'm going to challenge all of you to really question the way your thought processes work. If you think you have the solution to the problem, you're probably wrong. Because what Shaun has come to the table during my time with him anyway are some completely different ideas. I used to work with Shaun in the Department of Energy at the province of Manitoba. Over time, he went one way and I went another way. I'm now with the Public Utilities Board, about to hear Manitoba Hydro's rate application. But Shaun's mind is one that needs to be challenged. I'm not sure you're going to do it in the space of 2 or 3 hours tonight, or however long it takes, but I will encourage you, and I hope, Shaun, you're open to questions, because I got a bunch of them. But take whatever thought processes you have and throw them out the window, and I'm going to start the evening off with a quick example of a meeting I had with Shaun Loney about, when did we have breakfast? A couple months ago, maybe, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Shaun actually was giving me a bit of a tour out at his facility, and Shaun turns to me and says, "Kurt, we have a whole host of social problems in this province. Obviously, many of them have to do with First Nations, but it's not just First Nations, of course, that are dealing with many struggles. Kurt, how would you solve that problem?" So the question went something like that. And I remember I thought about this for quite some time, and the first thing I thought about was education. You got to educate people. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I bet you half of you here would put up your hands on education. And Shaun said to me, "No. How do you solve these problems that many of the people that he talks about in his book? How do you do it?" And he says, "Driver's license." I remember that distinctly. You've got to start with a driver's license. Think about it for a minute. How can you get a job these days without a driver's license? Without that, it's almost useless. So you can see where I'm going in thought processes. I think you'll see a lot of his examples in the book that he's going to talk to you about tonight. And I encourage you to listen to his ideas, and for God's sakes, ask him all the tough questions that you possibly can, because he's probably got the solution. I'm here to do fact checking, because that's what I've done with this guy for 15 years. Just fact check him and correct his path. Anyway, Shaun.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If I had been here a little earlier and thought about it, I would have had us all sitting in a circle. So a preacher. Circles are strong. They include everyone, and I think part of what I'm going to be talking with you about today is what does that circle look like when it comes to the economy. Kurt is correct. We worked together for quite some time. So I had this experience inside government, which has really informed our view forward. And somebody said, "Oh, you have a master's degree in economics. I mean, that must be why you can think through some of this stuff." I said, "No, actually, that was pretty much a useless exercise. It was working inside government, which was really informative for me, because I found that where you find bad outcomes, that bad government policy isn't very far away." And in Manitoba, I'll just give you some quick stats. I'm going to talk to you as taxpayers. 75% of inmates in our correctional institutions are Indigenous. 15% of the population of Manitoba, but 75% of inmates are Indigenous, and 93 of them are men. $100,000 a year to incarcerate someone, and I'm going to tell you something we're not just talking about, we're actually doing. Moving these guys into the workforce for $20,000 a pop, and at the same time they're generating $80,000 over a lifetime of utility bill reductions. 75% of our healthcare expenditures are now on diseases where diet is the main risk factor. Isn't that something? And we're talking about, should we privatize, should we public? 75% of our healthcare expenditures are now on diseases where diet is the main risk factor. What are some other ones? Garden Hill First Nations. I've been spending some time there, and there are about 40% of the people there have diabetes. 40% of people in Garden Hill is an Oja Creek community. They never had diabetes at all in 1975. So in just a short generation, we've been able to significantly, their food economy has significantly deteriorated to the point. So it's $1 million a bed for a dialysis bed in Garden Hill, which saves money because then they don't have to be flown down to Winnipeg for dialysis treatment. And $100,000 a year per patient in Garden Hill to get dialysis treatment. $100,000 a year. And there's 38 people on the dialysis waiting list just in Garden Hill. So we're spending more on fossil fuels in Manitoba than we spend on provincial income taxes. And natural gas prices are quite low right now, but in terms of gasoline, natural gas, and diesel. So these are some examples of some extraordinary problems that we're struggling with. And they're pretty daunting if you think about the problems. But the exciting news is that we've come to realize, and I think governments are soon going to realize, that you need a problem solver to solve a problem. And governments make it very difficult for problem solvers, and the campaign that we are on is for governments to realize they need to make it easy for problem solvers and give us access to the problems. And I'll give you some examples of problem solvers. So the book is called An Army of Problem Solvers, and what would that be like if there were problem solvers everywhere? And who are the problem solvers? Well, I put them in 3 categories. There's social enterprises, and I've helped to start now 12 different social enterprises, most of them in Manitoba, which I'm going to talk about. Social enterprises are non-profit businesses. So as Kurt says, it's a little different because people are most used to private sector or non-profits or the First Nation chief and council. And what social enterprises do is they take the best part of the non-profits, the community orientedness, and the best part of that private sector model, which is entrepreneurial ingenuity, and combine them. How many of you are Scottish, have any Scottish heritage at all? Quite a few. Not in the Lutheran crowd, usually there's even more people. Well, I have Scottish heritage, so my ancestors somewhere along the line invented the bagpipes, and I thank them very much for that. There are 5,200 social enterprises in Scotland, population of 5 million people. 200 new ones every year, and they're problem solvers. So Scotland's poverty rates are coming down. Scotland's homelessness, all of these, some of the stats that I was talking about, they're trending in the right direction because Scotland is making sure that problem solvers are successful. So 5,200 and 4,500 of them hire people with barriers to employment. And that is our main defining issue in this province, is connecting the people who most need to work with the work that most needs to be done. And on our payrolls in Manitoba, we have about 10 social enterprises now. We have 200 people, most of them ex-gang members, people that I and others had completely written off before, which actually I find out make excellent coworkers, because we are hiring them. We're looking for people that don't have access to the labor market. So I'm going to come back to social enterprises in a minute, because that's what I've been on about. The second example of a problem solver is what we call a social entrepreneur. And you might think about an insulating company or a solar company, or some of you heard of Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is the guy that is a general manager, CEO of Tesla. Tesla is an electric car company. Well, he's so enamored with electric vehicles, which use about 10% of the gasoline as a regular vehicle, that he's put all of the plans for Tesla on the internet. Anybody wants to steal it, they can go right ahead, and they're driving changes in the industry. But social entrepreneurs they're focused on two things: so private profit, but also change in the system, trying to solve a problem. And so they're not nonprofits, they're for-profit, but also very good problem solvers. The third problem solver is a local food movement. And those of you who have been paying attention in this regard, you might have kind of heard, somebody that you know might have moved out to the country and started a farm, and maybe they grew up in the city. Or if you've been out to the St. Norbert Farmers Market lately, or you might be members of a community-supported agriculture, CSA. Some of that sounds familiar. That is growing leaps and bounds in Manitoba. There are now 350 farms in Manitoba that use no pesticides and use no fertilizer off the farm. And this will sound familiar because this is how our grandparents farmed, right? They used the manure from the chickens to grow the carrots, and the tops from the carrots are composted and used on the farm. So that method of farming is becoming more and more popular. At the University of Winnipeg, there's this. They're knocking off two of these in one approach. They've hired a social enterprise called Diversity Foods that controls their entire food system at the University of Winnipeg. And Diversity Foods hires from the neighborhood, from the inner city, and 65% of their food purchases are from these small farmers who use no pesticides or fertilizers. And a great way to lower fossil fuel consumption, because those things are very fossil fuel intensive. But they also don't process their food. They sell it directly to us as consumers. So you get around the processing of the food. So those are the three problem solvers, which I think government should make it easy for. But in actuality, they make it very, very, very difficult for us. When Kurt and I worked together, natural gas prices spiked. This was in 2006, you remember that. And wow, it was like low-income families are really going to be hit hard by this. And so we had many conversations about this. So what's the best way to deal with it? Well, what some governments were doing is paying rebates. So you can imagine, $200 a month rebate times 100,000 low-income households. This is a massive amount of money, but it's totally temporary. It just helps a little bit. So we set up this, what at the time in my mind was a non-profit called BUILD, B-U-I-L-D. Some of you may have heard of that before. And BUILD has just celebrated 10 years, and we've lowered utility bills at 17,000 low-income households, and hired 600 people, mostly ex-gang members and people with long criminal records, to do the work, connecting the people who most need the work with the work that most needs to be done. And we went on to set up the next social enterprise was in 2008, and it's Manitoba Green Retrofit. Now, somewhere in there around 2007, 2008, I'd left government. Driving down Dufferin Avenue, you guys know where Dufferin Avenue is. We're going past Lord Selkirk Park. The people in the neighborhood call it the D, with the developments. And there's 250 low-income public housing units there. And I could see, looking out of my car, these contractors from outside the neighborhood who were hiring people from outside the neighborhood. And at the time, working at Build, we had 8 people on our workforce, but we were 100% government funded. And this next part is key to the success of these entities. And I said to my coworker, well, why is Manitoba Housing hiring contractors who in return hire people from outside the community? We've got stacks and stacks of resumes of these ex-gang members wanting to work with us, but we can't get enough government funding to employ them all. And my coworker said something that changed my life. He said, well, they are a contractor. We are a nonprofit, government-funded business. So I said to him, what would it take to be a contractor? And he said, I don't know. We've got a truck, we've got a carpenter, a bank account. I guess we'll just tell Manitoba Housing that we are contracting. So we did. And a group of us now, social enterprises, do $7 million a year of business with Manitoba Housing. And in Scotland, every single government tender that goes out by its crowns and government in general, every single tender says, you must do business. You're acquiring goods and services on behalf of the taxpayer. You must do business with social enterprises. And if you do not, you need to get your butts key into cabinet and ask for an exemption. It completely turns the tables on what normally happens, and in return, the power going into the community. So we needed an entity to hire these guys once they were finished with our training program. And by training at Build, we do parenting, we also do trades-based tutoring, financial literacy, driver's licensing. 75% of job postings require a driver's license. We haven't hired anybody yet with a driver's license because we can't find anyone that has a driver's license and needs a job. Go try to find me somebody with a driver's license that is chronically unemployed. It's not possible. But most of the people that I work with and on First Nations have no access to driver's training. And I find that to be troublesome as a society. And one of the things we talk about reconciliation, I think that is very important. But we set up Manitoba Green Retrofit to hire these guys when they're done. And one of the main things that Manitoba Green Retrofit does, and this taught me a lesson as well, is that they remediate bed bugs. So we love bed bugs. So why do we love bed bugs? Because we can hire more people in the remediation. So this is the trick of this paradigm, is that you've got, in low-income communities, you've got all these goods and services are coming in and money flowing right back out. And what we're doing is saying, what's coming in? What can we do of what's coming into these communities? And instead circulate that money and create employment at the same time. So for Manitoba Green Retrofit, we purchased a social enterprise center. So you know where the old train station is on Higgins, CPR train station. Most people nod their heads. It's now the Aboriginal Center. We're on the other side of that. We're on the north side of the tracks, an old CPR mail sorting facility. It's owned by, it's a social enterprise. It's a non-profit business. It's a social enterprise industrial hub right here in Winnipeg. It's the first of its kind in North America. And this is where most of our social enterprises are headquartered. And it's a pretty inspiring place to hang out. After Manitoba Green Retrofit, we were working in Toronto and in St. John's, Newfoundland, and in Brandon, Manitoba. So there are 3 Build-like entities in those cities: Brandon, Toronto, and St. John's. The one in St. John's is now one of the largest construction companies in St. John's, Newfoundland. And not a lot of Aboriginal people there, but lots of homeless people. So they're hiring them, and they're doing insulating, water retrofits, and they've now started doing apartment turnovers. So that's a big part of the $7 million of business we do with Manitoba Housing. is getting apartments ready for new families to move into, so lots of patching and painting. And that's very exciting. But so that story was unfolding, and it was very, very encouraging. And as I say, 200 people in Manitoba are working for social enterprises that are doing business for Manitoba Housing, just as our main client. But we decided we need to get working on First Nations. And this is where the story for us becomes much more stark. So we set up a social enterprise. I was actually working with this guy here. His name's Darcy Wood. He's a former chief of the Garden Hill First Nation. And he worked at the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs for 10 years, and he worked in the area of policy, housing policy. And I thought, I have no idea what it's like to live in a First Nation or to do business on a First Nation. I don't have a lot of First Nation contacts. This guy has all that. So we teamed up and formed a social enterprise called Aki Energy. And Aki is an Ojibwe and Ojibwe word for earth. And we started doing geothermal. And we've now done 320 houses. We've converted from electric heat to geothermal. It's $7 million worth of capital that we've installed in those houses. The two largest geothermal companies in Western Canada are social enterprises that Aki has started. One's at Fisher River Cree Nation, one's at Pegos First Nation, and then Aki is also very substantial. And we've done $7 million worth of geothermal work for no government funding. How do we do that? And this is in essence what I've realized is the answer to every social problem we have. And that is a financing mechanism. So the utility bills when we go are big. Doesn't matter what they are, they're just big. And we install a geothermal, which is what you need to know about geothermal is not how it works, but that it's a lot of money up front, but it saves a lot of energy. So the utility bills are cut in approximately half. All right, you follow me so far? So we're going from this to this. But what's left over is a whole bunch of utility bill reductions. Okay? So what happens is that Manitoba Hydro provides the money up front to install a geothermal system between $15,000 and $20,000 a house. Sounds like a lot of money, right? $15,000 and $20,000 a house. But Hydro gets their money back over 20 years through $75 monthly payments on the utility bills. So they just keep collecting that $75 a month until they get their entire $20,000 back. And the beautiful thing about it is that those bill reductions are actually bigger than the financing fee. Follow me? Now the exciting thing about this thing, and I talk about this, call it what you want, pay as you save. We have 8,900 Indigenous kids in care in Manitoba. That's more than we ever had in residential schools. The cost of keeping those kids in care from baby to age 18 is $2 million per kid. $2 million. And we kind of get the hang of what happens to a lot of kids when they're in care. Some of them make out well, but some of them don't when they're not with their parents. And for example, in Stony Mountain, 95% of the men in Stony Mountain were wards of the system. Just to give you an idea. A lot of the people that I work with were wards of the system. Now, the exciting news is that there are Indigenous nonprofits, including in Winnipeg. I'll give you one example that I talk about in the book called Mamaway. Well, Mamaway is saying, look, Indigenous child welfare is not training Indigenous social workers to seize Indigenous kids from homes. Indigenous child welfare, the elders are saying, is keeping families together. So they were trained by the Maori in New Zealand, who have solved this problem there. And what the Maori do is this radical concept called bringing the mom in with her support network and the dad with his support network. They sit in a circle and they talk. And the facilitator says, is there something we can do to keep this child out of care? And anything that we can do as an organization to support you in those efforts. The cost of that is about $20,000 per kid. Remember the $2 million? 2 million versus 20,000? The success rate, 80%. There is absolutely no money for the $20,000 solution. I'm talking none. But the more kids are seized, your government, my government, comes up with taxpayer dollars, $2 million a kid, no questions asked. Why? Because we're focused on the problem and not the problem solver. We need to say, Momoli, you got a solution here. We're not interested in your little program with keeping 10 kids out of care on a biannual basis. We want 100. What do you need to make that happen? How can we get that going on First Nations? How can that be rapidly expanded? And that is the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. $2 million, 20,000. Which one would you rather pay? Governments must change, and if we care at all about reconciliation, we will demand that they change. Now, back to the geothermal piece, because it's using the same financing model. I'm glad you seem to understand what it is I'm talking about. But in May, so this time last year, we announced a new geothermal program at Winnipeg, Ojibwe Nation, which is sort of western Manitoba. And we'll see how good Kurt is on his math. He used to be pretty good. But we found there's 400 houses at Wayway, which are good fit for geothermal. So at $20,000 a house.
Oh, I'm sorry.
4 million, or 400 houses times $20,000 a house. $8 million. Pretty smart guy, eh? Isn't that exciting? An $8 million geothermal program at Wayway Capital, Ojibwe Nation. Half of that is labor, on-reserve labor. So that would be $4 million of on-reserve labor. And what was the cost of that again? Zero, right? It's actually negative cost because the benefits are actually bigger than the cost. That's pretty exciting. So we announced it in the media. Great article. And then we got this little email from the federal government. I keep reminding myself I should print this out and bring it around, but they said, you remember that financing fee? That's the magic that made this thing work, that paid back Manitoba Hydro, and the financing fee was smaller than the bill reductions. We're not paying that financing fee anymore. Oh, that's interesting. So you're choosing high utility bills, which create no employment, over low utility bills, which create employment. Yeah. If you're interested in geothermal on First Nations, the game goes like this. You apply for funding. If it's accepted, if we think it's a good idea, we tender it. And when it gets tendered, there's 3 outside companies will bid on it. The lowest bidder gets the price. And this is when the chiefs in the room, or the First Nations folks in the room, they start nodding their head because they know how this plays out. We just hear about it in the news. People come in from outside, install crappy equipment with low efficiency rates in this case. Nobody locally has any hot idea how to install it, how to maintain it, and no responsibilities to do so. And then we hear in the news, water systems have broken down. People have boil water advisories. Well, that's the water end of it. But on the energy end of it, it happens too. So we said no. So we went to the media again, and maybe some of you read this in the Winnipeg Free Press and said that the federal government had stopped an $8 million economic development initiative at Wayway Capital First Nation that didn't cost them any money. And I told my coworkers, when I go to the media, this is my specialty. I chase bureaucrats around. I used to be one. And I will have this fixed within 48 hours. So I was pretty brave to say that because this is so stupid. So within 24 hours, the minister's office calls and says, Mr. Loney, we're very upset that this has happened and we want you to know we're going to restore your funding. We don't have any funding. Oh, we don't want the funding? No, we don't want the funding. Why? Because every First Nation in this country should have the tools to be successful. If we accept that funding, we're not your problem anymore, and you're going to not receive our heat, and you are going to accept our heat and feel it until you make this world right, this little part of the world right. Oh, so 2 days later, so now 72 hours later, the phone's back. Mr. Loney, yes, call me Shaun. Shaun, you said that Waywaysa Capital is an $8 million project. We've got great news for you. We found you $8 million taxpayer money. This is your money to do geothermal at Wayway. You know what we told them? Screw off. Don't want your funding. You are going to change these rules so every First Nation has the tools to be successful. Well, that's not how we operate. Well, you're going to operate that way. So, and this little sucker comes out not too long after that, because this story is recounted in the book. We've now sold 4,000 copies of this, which is enough. I just heard this today. It's actually enough to be considered a national bestseller, but it's been on the Manitoba bestseller list since October at McNally Robinson. And we've sold 4,000 copies. We've ordered 2,000 more. And the federal organization that oversees First Nations or governs the relationship between First Nations and the federal government is called INAC, Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada. So I went for some meetings there in December, and every second desk there in Gatineau, Quebec has a copy of this book. This little book from our little wee province, our expression of economic justice, has grown out of work that many of you have done, Peter included. That work that you pounded away on the hydrophile is different than what I'm talking about, but it makes a difference in the collective consciousness. And I'm going to get back to what that looks like briefly, but I want to tell you one more story. So we went to the Garden Hill First Nation. I was very keen to go there because not only was my coworker from there, but my grandparents were United Church ministers in Garden Hill in the 1960s. And I grew up on Garden Hill stories. And my grandpa said to me when I was a kid, so, you know, I had the last garden in Garden Hill. I had the last garden in Garden Hill. I remember him telling me that when I was a kid. And so we went to Garden Hill. And we kind of expected to be looking at geothermal, but I was pretty sure it wasn't going to work there very well because it's on rock. You can't get the loop in the ground. So we're going to do biomass instead. Pay people to cut wood chips, burn the wood chips to heat hot water. The Hutterites do this all over southern Manitoba. The hot water goes through the homes and the heat is extracted. I got there and all I could see was this diabetes. These people don't need geothermal and biomass. They need a friggin' food system. And what do you need to solve a problem? You need a problem solver. That's as much as I knew about this file. I don't have a food background. Kurt and I were working on energy stuff. So we started a social enterprise called Meacham. And you'll remember from your Oja Creek classes in school that Meacham means food. And I asked the elders, well, can we not name it good food at least? And they all kind of laughed. There is no word for good food. There wasn't good food and bad food. There's just food, and the food was good. Meacham Food, so we have a 13-acre farm, 1,000 chickens, and I said 1,000 chickens is illegal, by the way. You can only have 999 chickens in Manitoba without a quota. So I said, I don't care how many chickens we have, I just want it to be illegal. And so we got it up to 1,000. And we also, it's 13 acres. Like some of you know, that's the size of the Polo Park shopping center, including the parking. We asked them to clear the land of First Nation and that we were going to bring some dollars to the table for the rest of it. And I thought they might clear like a couple of this room, you know, and maybe an acre or two. And they cleared 13 acres. The only reason why it was just 13 acres is because they ran out of gas. It would have been much more than that. So it's hugely successful. This is our third year coming up. And we've got, well, I can explain how it's all set up if you're interested in that, but we've got the kids coming from the school. They're planting seedlings in the school, and then they plant the seedlings they have their own plots. So when I was a kid, we got our parents recycling, because we went home and said, you need to be recycling. So we're taking that same approach, starting with the kids. And then we're also starting a farm school, and we have a healthy food market. So on check days, we have a sea container, like a back of a truck, and we open it up, and we sell $20,000 of healthy food a month at Garden Hill now. But when outcomes are bad government policy isn't very far away. Well, there's this federal program, back to my friends at the federal government, there's this program called Nutrition North Canada. Well, they put $1 million a year into the Northern store at Garden Hill. The Northern store sells 90% unhealthy food. That's your taxpayer dollars. $1 million, this is just in Garden Hill. This is just one First Nation. They're giving those bastards $1 million a year just in Garden Hill to sell 90% unhealthy food. That makes me really angry. You know how much Meacham gets? None. Nothing. Why? Because in order to be eligible, it's a freight subsidy. You have to fly the food in from outside. If we flew the chickens into Winnipeg and then flew them back to Garden Hill, they would talk to us. They won't pay for seed potatoes. They won't pay for apple trees. They won't pay for chicken feed. They won't pay for the chicks. But they'll give the Northern store $1 million of your hard-earned goddamn bucks. So I go to see Stan McCabe. Have you guys heard of Stan McCabe before? He's a former moderator in United Church Canada. Cree elder. They give him some tobacco. Stan, I'm going to write a book. Good. You'll see I've interviewed him in chapter 3. Tell me, what happened to the gardens in Garden Hill? Well, he had an answer for that question. He said, Shaun, when my grandparents were young, when the community was thriving, everybody had something to do. But the settlers came along. And who are the settlers? Who are they? Tell me now. They're my grandparents. They're your parents. They're your grandparents. Fine, good, solid, caring people. They came along, often running from somewhere else. Mine got out as a potato famine was happening in Ireland. So they cut the trees down to plant, and that led to no gain. They irrigated the land, which meant in Stan's case, the Fisher River increased in velocity, and that killed the trapping. Indigenous farmers, and this is true, got about half the price for their fish as non-Indigenous farmers. And Stan told me, Shaun, when I went to residential school, I got in the back of a cattle truck. In the back of a cattle truck. And in my pocket was some money from a cow that my dad sold. And that cow had to get permission to sell it from this guy called an Indian agent. So I'm writing another book. I'm thinking of calling it Agent Indian, because there's modern day Indian agents all over the place. And it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Well, one of the jobs of the Indian agent was to make sure that there were no outside companies that were negatively impacted by economic activity on the First Nation. So I researched some more. Couchiching First Nation is close to where I grew up on. There was a very successful sawmill there, which was shut down by the federal government, by the Indian agent, because it was illegal to sell off the First Nation. And I give lots of examples, and I go briefly through all 4 of my grandparents' family stories. And what I've come to realize is that there's poverty and privilege. They are flip sides of each other. You cannot have one without the other. They go hand in hand. Doesn't mean that we're bad for privilege. I am more privileged than all of you. I'll go head to head with any of you on privilege right now. I am white, I am male, I am heterosexual, I am well educated, I am married, I have kids. I'm doing okay. I'm just saying, in society, there's those of us that the economy is made for. And that's for me and my kids. And when you can't get a goddamn driver's license, and 75% of the jobs require a driver's license, I have an issue with that. And that's what I'm talking about. Some of us, it's just easy. It's so easy for me to be successful. Well, my master's degree, and I'm going to tell a story about this Carson Bruce in a minute. His driver's license is actually a bigger achievement than my master's degree. It's just a big accomplishment for him to be able to overcome that. And some of us were born on third base and think we hit a triple. So this conversation with Stan, I mean, I'm just kind of going into it a little bit, but it really helped me see what happened to the gardens in Garden Hill, because you add in the residential school system, you add in the 60s scoop, you add in all that, and what government said at the time, our government, was that the purpose of all that was to take the Indian out of the child. You've heard that before? Well, we're finding out about that, but what this book is saying is that at the very same time, we were taking the Indian out of the economy. And so we need economic reconciliation in this country. And you know, when I made the connection at Stan's living room, that, you know, when the federal government said we couldn't use this pay-as-you-save system, that was just like the Indian agent saying, no, you can't be promoting First Nation economic activity. That's going to hurt an outside company. You've got to tender it, an outside company is going to come in. That's the way we do business. You can't have a farm at Garden Hill First Nation. That's not right. You need to be importing food from outside. So that it's the same thing, and I think that's the colonial legacy of all that. So I'll tell you a story here in a minute, but I wanted to start to finish by saying that I write in the book about what I call the 3 myths of poverty. These are 3 things that I was very surprised at in my 10 years doing this. The first is that there's not enough money. We keep hearing that. There's not enough money to solve the diabetes problem. Well, if you give us 10% of what's going to the northern store, we will solve the diabetes problem. There's plenty of money. Not enough money for our healthcare system. 75% of our healthcare expenditures are on diseases where diet is the main risk factor. Do not tell me there's not enough money. $100,000 a year to incarcerate somebody who we can employ for $20,000, and they reconnect with their kids often, start paying taxes. So there's plenty of money. It's being spent on problems, and that's the issue. We need to be supporting problem solvers. Second thing is a little tough if you're from the right side of the political spectrum. This one's hard. And that is that the myth is that low-income and indigenous people don't want to work. And it's an easy thing for us to see because you have Indians, I use that colloquially, and then they're not working, so you make the connection that they don't want to work. Come see me at my workplace. We have truckloads of resumes. I went to a job fair one time. The guy who was organizing it begged me. I said, we don't have any, we have wait lists that are 4 years long. I don't want to go to the job fair. Please come, do me a favor. So I go, and this is a true story. They had to phone security to get me out of there because when those people realized that we hired them despite the fact that they didn't have a driver's license and that they had a criminal record, they were aggressive, saying, you don't understand. I've got kids at home. I need that job. Please, 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 can I have that job? And we can't respond to them because the procurement system, for example, government doesn't think it's valuable to be hiring people that would otherwise be incarcerated. Or these examples that I'm using on First Nations. So that's myth number 2. I go into it in more detail. Myth number 3 is a little tough for those of us that might consider ourselves from the left side of the political spectrum. And that is that poverty has causes. We've been told a load of bunk for a couple generations that we got to get at the root causes of poverty. Have you heard that before? That's what we need to do. We need to get at the root causes of poverty. Well, it turns out poverty has no causes. Darkness has no causes. It's the absence of light. Cold has no causes. It's the absence of heat. And poverty is nothing more than the absence of prosperity. Poverty is the absence of prosperity. We've been focused on the wrong thing. We need to be focused on prosperity. That's why no one's noticed driver's licenses before, because they're too worried about the problem and not enough about the prosperity that's going to solve the problem. So those are the 3 poverty myths which I have been very surprised at myself, all 3 of those things. I'm surprised that there is lots of money. I'm surprised that low-income people and indigenous people want to work. I'm ashamed to say that to you today. I am ashamed to say that to you today. And that poverty has no causes. That's very important for us to remember. So, about 8 or 9 years ago, you'll remember the Harper government was expanding the amount of people that were incarcerated, mandatory minimums. Remember this? Well, we had a protest in front of the legislature. We were really pissed off because the NDP government was supporting that legislation. And we were going to let them know we weren't so happy. By the way, the last act of the Selinger government that I remember was announcing a new jail in Dauphin. A new jail in Dauphin in this period of reconciliation. When it's $100,000 per person to keep them in a year, or $20,000 at the Social Enterprise Center, the justice system never sees them again. They chose the $100,000 per year per person to lock up my coworkers. We were upset. 500 people in front of the legislature. I could hear somebody yelling my name from up high somewhere. Shaun. And I look up and I thought, is that the Justice Minister, Andrew Swan, leaning out his window saying, Shaun, we get it, we understand. We've made a real bad thing here. We've done something really bad and we're going to reverse course. And there's no Andrew Swan hanging out his window. Shaun, is that the Premier hanging out his window saying, we get it, we understand? We're in the wrong paradigm here. And no Premier. Shaun, I look up on the roof of the legislature, and there is one of my former coworkers. His name's Carson Bruce. What the hell is Carson Bruce doing in the roof of the legislature? So when I last saw Carson, first of all, what you need to know about Carson is that he was in between crack deals when he dropped off his resume at Build. He was in between crack deals. We hired him because of that. And Carson did very well. The last time I saw him, he said, Shaun, I'm renting a 5-bedroom house. He was on his way. He was in a 3rd level apprenticeship. He got a nice job at PCL Construction. He was renting a 5-bedroom house. Why was he doing that? I asked him that. I said, Shaun, I'm getting my kids back. Getting my kids back. He's on the top of the legislature, on the roof, and I look up, he's got a PCL construction hat on. They get some contractor fixing the roof at the legislature. Carson's up there working. He's got a tool belt on, and he's got a wallet in his pocket, and in his wallet is an apprenticeship card, a driver's license, a library card, and pictures of his kids. I know that. And he hollered down something to me, which I will never forget. And he was talking to me, sure, but I think he was talking to you too. He said, Shaun, what are you doing down there? What are we doing down there? So I was listening to a Grand Chief of Treaty 8 was asked the question, what does reconciliation mean to you? And I thought, wow, this is a guy who was involved with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He should have a snappy answer for that. He was stumped. What does reconciliation mean to you, Grand Chief? And he just said, you know what it means to me? It means we're going to do it our way for a little while. And I looked up, we're going to do it our way for a little while. And I remember thinking, I looked up at Carson and I thought, we're going to do it your way for a little while. Because our way's not working very well at all. So here it is, Army of Problem Solvers. This movement is going quick. It's growing leaps and bounds. There's a national conference in Winnipeg this week. My partner is picking up this guy from Camrose, Alberta. He grew up in the United Church. He's got a Cree mom. They've already started a social enterprise installing solar. And get this, this is not immediate. We're going to announce it probably 12 months from now. We're going to set up a cathedral project where people can donate money. This is how cathedrals were built in Europe. People donate money, get an income tax credit. The money is pooled. The solar panels go on the roof of a church or a mosque or a synagogue. And the savings that the church enjoys from those solar panels are enumerated, and that church sends a check back into the fund, which is used to put more solar panels up on more churches, synagogues, public buildings, mosques. Isn't that cool? And the work could be done by social enterprises right across the country. This is the type of thing that social innovation means. It's just a different way of doing things. And I guess this is the last thing that I want to say is that the solutions are different than what I thought they were. And Kurt, I'm very impressed, Kurt, that you opened up with that, because you've been surprised.
I said driver's license.
And yeah, so is this a right-wing thing or left-wing thing? People are confused by that. I think that our political spectrum that we've been used to and called this left-right thing is meaningless on this file. And I think that Mennonite Central Committee and the Canadian Council of Churches have been on this for a long time, but it's just becoming more mainstream now. Because it's work. I go on right-wing talk radio shows in Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg, and these guys call in and say, you think that we should be locking more people up and they should be, throw away the key. And I said, well, that's interesting. You call yourself a conservative, sir? Yes. Well, you're paying $100,000 a year for them to sit in their duff and be unproductive and not be bad. Don't you think it'd be better if they were working, paying taxes? Yeah. Right. Who is closing jails down in Texas? In Texas, there's 1 out of every 20 people was incarcerated. About 6 years ago, they started to reverse that trend. Republicans, because they're tired of paying the taxes. This is a left-wing thing or a right-wing thing? I'm not sure. But the solutions aren't more government, and they're not more corporations. It's something very different. And it's not halfway in between the two. It's not a compromise between the two, because that's even worse in many ways. It's taking the best of both. So, thank you for coming and listening to me. I've been all over the country. I've been in every major Canadian city at least once, some of them 4 times, except for Regina and St. John, New Brunswick. If you know anybody there, call. And people often say, what can I do? Well, you can read the book and buy a few. The profits don't go to me, they go back to our social enterprises. Give them to your MP and your MLA and your city councilors, because we address opportunities for all 3 of them in there. Really good opportunities to do that. So,
on behalf of the group, I certainly want to thank you for taking the time
Thank you
to
for having
have
me.
a conversation with us and to challenge us also in terms of being participants in the kind of social enterprises that we've been involved with. And to, I think we need to challenge our governmental structures a lot more as religious communities.
Agreed.
So, how would it be we give Shaun a hand?